I love that that just came through. I love what comes through when I'm chatting to you.
Oh, it's also the background though. There's something about your background right now that's bringing me into like a long table with candles and kind of low lit light and just this kind of banquet. I feel like actually that's what we've created here
It's
between
the
the two.
two.
Like the masked ball, like
Masked ball. I've always wanted to go to one. I've never been. I really would love that experience. I would love to host one with you.
yeah, me too.
That would be fucking amazing.
But then neither of us are allowed to run off. Like
No.
maybe like the twins, like people would be like, where did they go?
Yeah.
We don't care. We're gonna go play out here.
Yeah, we'll be down by the river.
Getting naked with our masks still on. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? Oh my god. There's a whole movie in that, you know, there's a whole creative movie where we like bring the scene in and people sit down and then we like ask them what they want, but then halfway through we start taking our clothes off and people are just like, what's going on? And then we start crawling on the table and like put like shredding things and throwing them everywhere, and then people just like, what's going on? And then we end up in the river.
What? Like, because for me, it's almost like these stories are just pouring through me. So listening to Clarissa Pinkola Estes has just sparked so much. And obviously having my little cocooning phase away from social media, which is where I normally would be expressing different kinds of things. It's like, it's kind of invited me into just allowing things to brew, like we've been talking about, just allowing these different things to brew. And suddenly in that kind of quiet spaciousness, these stories are just coming through. And I feel like they're really related to, because I started a group called Resurrecting the Mother, which is more for supporting mothers who just being in their totality, mothers being in their totality. And I haven't really done much with it. There's a few women in there that are in my group for Revolt, which is the radical unschooling side of things. But the Resurrecting the Mother really landed for me a few months ago. It was just like this feeling of like, do you remember when I was speaking to you about feeling like the mother's been so kind of stripped of her totality and her kaleidoscopic expression and really pushed and shoved into this box? And I know a lot of that is the feminine in general, but definitely I feel like the mother's really just got this very hollow, you know, 2D kind of persona out in the world, and with such a lack of reverence for especially the darker aspects of her nature that are so integral to the whole, like the, you know, the destructive aspect, the death aspect, and you know, we spoke about this with the hag. But yeah, as I'm sitting with this month, as I'm having my little, you know, cocooning time, these stories are starting to come through like a book wants to be written, a collection of stories about resurrecting the mother. And when I say mother, I'm not just meaning, you know, the mother is becoming so much more to me than just a mother who births babies. It's like the mother who births everything, that creative essence of ours. And I think, you know, when we're leaning into the totality of mother, we're really leading into our core essence and what we're here to birth into the world. So as creatives, as artists, you know, the artist and the mother, I'm starting to understand, are like one and the same. Like it's this intertwined, you know, yeah, this intertwined archetypal essence that's in all of us, and not just women either. There's the men have this too, but definitely as a creative, if we can lean into that, we really kind of offer ourselves the greatest spiritual practice of all. Like, I feel like mothering and the artist and the creative, when we're leading into the possibilities of that, we're really leading into a spiritual practice. It is the deepest spiritual practice that one can really kind of connect with, because yeah, you have to show up in your totality. You have to show up and meet all of those edges and all of the yuckiness and all of the ugliness. And I wrote a little post yesterday to the mothers in that group, just saying, you know, how would you feel if you replaced your title as mother with the title of artist? Because so often it's like, I'm just a mother. But that, you know, if someone says I'm just an artist, that carries so much more intrigue and excitement and curiosity and like, ooh, tell me what you do. But really, like, mothering is the greatest act of art, birthing things into the world. And you can't turn away from the muck when you're a mother, because you've got to keep showing up for this creation that you've birthed, your bub. I mean, you can turn away, but it's a lot harder. You can't just rip it up and go, fuck this sucks. I'm starting again. I don't like this piece. It's shit. You know, you can't do that. You have to keep being creative and keep meeting the mess and fucking up along the way, and then coming back to clean up the mess and tending to it, rather than just putting in the bin and being done with it.
I really
so
feel this.
Just been sitting with all of that.
I feel that, like, literally as you're talking, the bringing through of the creation from the womb, from source, is just such a huge thing for us to reclaim, because we've been told that our bodies are so wrong. And I feel like it's a huge part of that feeling like the mother is, you know, it's kind of forgotten, because we've forgotten the sacredness of the body and how to bring through life, and that we do bring through life. It's just like it's become this thing where it's like, yeah, that just happens. Yeah, that just happens. It's like, what? You know, when we lose the respect and the honor and the sacredness of life and what it means to birth and what it means to be present to that creation and what it means to tend to that creation, that's when we start to feel the vitality and the aliveness. And this is how I feel the resurrection of the mother is coming back again, is that we really connect with the fact that we are bringing through life from the portal of divine source energy. We are these vessels, the earth body vessels, through which this magic is experienced. And I feel the depth of the story is so important, because it brings us into a very visceral physical experience. Like, when we're talking about these like deep, dark kind of mother, like hag stories, or, you know, grandmother stories, like, we feel it in our bodies, don't we? We feel it in our bones, we feel it in our skin. We, like, you know, it either makes us crawl, or it makes us feel like, ooh, or like whatever. It makes us feel lots of different things, but it really moves us. And I feel like that's what's being called back in, is like, how can we fucking move the mother again? How can we really actually move one another, like kind of puppets, you know? Like, let's bring this back and shake people up and wake their bodies up to like what's actually going on out, like this deep slumber, or like severing of the umbilical cord from source energy, like severing from the mother and baby. It's like, you know, really coming back to that depth of feeling and sensory experience. And the story that you were sharing with me the other day about the mother who eats her babies, that made me feel so sick, but like in so many ways. It like moved me in so many ways that I felt in my gut alive. I felt in my womb alive, even if it was grief or sickness or anger or whatever it was. It was like, these things move us to realize our humanness. And these stories and these, you know, creations are so important. And I feel, yeah, if you wanted to share a little bit about that, because it was so moving, whether you know you're right.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you want me to share that story. And it's interesting. Let me just, I'm just going to turn off my Bluetooth because I think maybe it was creating a bit of feedback. Yeah, so because obviously this isn't it, these stories are just pouring through me, like I was just saying, and they're starting to just create this little book within my head, and I haven't written any of them down yet. There's only really two main ones, one that we just created just then together before this call that just came through, which obviously still has some fleshing out to do, but this, I called it the starved mother. So the starved mother has just been pouring through, and it's slowly been building in my system as a story that I'd love to tell. And I was thinking as I was running through it in my head last night, I was like, this is going to be the first time I'm really publicly sharing this. But in the tradition of storytelling where things weren't originally written down, I feel like this is really potent kind of exploration for me as well, not having it all written down and perfect. I'm just going to go with like the feeling right now. And it's every time you tell a story like that, it will shift based on the audience, the time, what comes through in the moment. So yeah, this will be the first time. So let's see how it comes through. It might be slightly different to when I told you, Gigi, but let's see how it comes through. So the starved mother, if you can just imagine this woman, and she's standing by the stove, and she has this big pot of soup, and this soup just brings her so much joy. It's like this creation that she's constantly stirring and pouring different ingredients into and getting just right. So every day she's by this stove. And from this stirring of this pot, this stirring of this soup, she becomes pregnant. And she's overjoyed. This is all she wants. She wants this baby. She's so excited, and she nourishes herself throughout the whole pregnancy, and she gives birth to this beautiful baby. And she's just smitten, and all her attention, all her focus is on the beautiful perfectness of this baby, and its skin is so smooth, and its eyes are so bright, and its hair, and she's just overwhelmed with, awe. And then one day she looks at this baby and she sees her own reflection, and what she sees is not something that she really enjoys, and it doesn't feel good. And she doesn't really like to look at this. So she turns away, and she goes back to her pot of soup, and she starts stirring and stirring and stirring. And, the baby starts to kind of cry and wants some attention. And she looks, but again, every time she looks at her baby, she sees this reflection of herself that she's not liking. And so she starts to turn away more and more, and she starts to kind of push the baby further and further away from her. So her baby ends up on the other side of the kitchen, and she's more focused on this pot of soup. And her soup's just bringing her so much joy again. And she's like, oh yeah, my soup. And she's putting in all these beautiful ingredients, and she's getting really excited about the taste of her soup. And she can still hear this baby crying, and she's just not dealing with it. She starts to get really, really, like, a lot of emotion starts to come through, and she really just doesn't want to hear this anymore. So she cuts off her own ears, so she doesn't have to hear this baby's crying anymore. And in that process, finally, she's finds some peace again, and she's just immersed in this stirring of the soup. And eventually the baby stops crying because she's just not being heard. And so the mother continues with this stirring, and again starts to focus on, oh, I want a baby. I want a baby. I want this baby. She forgets that she's ever had this other baby. And so she stirs, and then another baby is born, and she goes through this same process. Same thing happens. She reaches a point where she feels discomfort through the reflection of this baby. And, this time the baby's a little bit more, let's say, got a little bit more nous, and rather than just crying, the baby crawls all the way up and is tugging at her legs and pulling at her skin. And she just, you know, she's feeling like her whole body's just crawling in disgust and just does not want to look at this thing. And so she cuts off her legs so she can't feel the baby pulling at her legs anymore. And again, the same thing happens. The baby kind of just stops trying to reach out because it's getting nowhere. And again, this process happens again and again and again and again and again. And the mother just keeps cutting off pieces of herself. She cuts off her ears, like I said, her legs, her arms, her body. Everything's just starting to kind of, she's becoming less and less of herself. She's got one arm left, one eye left, and she's standing over this pot. And there's all these shriveled up babies that are behind her that have just shriveled into nothingness. They're these shriveled up, they also almost resemble these pieces of dried tomatoes or dried herbs or something kind of littered around the room. And she gouges out her last eye in this process. And then she can't even see. So she mistakes all these shriveled up babies in her kitchen for ingredients. And she starts putting it in the soup. And she's desperate to find the nourishment that she's looking for. She's desperate to feel that sense of aliveness that comes from this creation. And so she unwittingly consumes all these babies, all her babies. She eats them in her soup, until the last babe is born, the very last one. And again, she goes through the same process, and all that's left to be gotten rid of is this one arm that's left. And she finds a way to pull so hard away from this last babe that she kind of severs her last arm. And she's left sitting. The baby again shrivels up because she's kind of, you know, severed herself from this babe, and she's left not only without all her limbs and her senses, her ears, her sense of smell, her eyes, but she's left now without even her soup. She can't even access her soup because there's nothing of her left. And so she too shrivels up there in the kitchen with the remnants of those babes and that soup.
It's so horrifying. It makes me laugh.
So funny that you laugh. Like,
Awful.
you're laughing.
I know,
But yeah,
I can't help it. It's like that deep cackle of just, you know, overwhelm as well. It's interesting as to what comes up with these things for me. I find like a deep, deep sadness sometimes comes up as a laugh for me.
yeah, no, I'm the same. And discomfort. And also when, you know, there's a lot there in that story. And so it's a lot of information too. And sometimes it's just like, what do I do with this? Because, you know, we can look at this story in so many different ways, but I'd love to just offer a little bit of kind of guidance for anyone listening around like, what? because also it's interesting because I feel like the trajectory of our humanness over the last however many decades is that we've looked at old fairy tales that are gruesome and gone, well, that's not appropriate and that's not appropriate. Let's whitewash all these things. And we only tell positive stories and we only tell things that are nice and we only tell, and, you know, I've been there myself and looked at things and gone, that's horrible. Why would I want my kids to listen to that or to watch this? But again, it's this severing of our totality, of the dark stuff, of the gruesome stuff, of the fact that death happens, of the fact that within our psyches lies all these different energetic currents, these different impulses that through conditioning and through just being born into this human vessel, we need to come to terms with, and we need to find peace within, and we need to find a level of coherence amongst these different kind of aspects of self, let's say. So now coming back to Clarissa Pinkola Estes' work, it's really inspired in me, and like the depth of really listening to some of these stories can really invoke a deepness in us that's not always something conscious, and we don't really understand how they're working with us sometimes. But over time and after kind of contemplation around these stories, we can start to see, oh, that's that part of my psyche playing out. And do I do this too? So my offering around just kind of decoding this story a little bit is, you know, when you think about the title, The Starved Mother, and I think I've written down somewhere why she starved. She starved of her own devotion. She starved of her own capacity to devote herself to her creations. So if we're thinking about our creative essence, and I know this has been really true for me, that spark of creation, when you're creating something in the beginning, it feels so good. You're like, oh, there's so much excitement, there's so much joy, there's so much like, I just want to share this with everyone, this is so awesome. And then you can get to a point in your creative project and in your mothering where your shit is reflected to you through the creation. You come up against all the stories and all the parts of the psyche that want to kind of tell you that what you're doing is not good enough, or show you a part of yourself that you didn't want to see. You know, maybe your frustration, maybe your anger, maybe your patterns of whatever it might be for you. We're all going to be a little bit different in what comes up. And it's really easy to be like, I'm just not going to look at that anymore. I'm actually just not going to do that. I'm going to make an excuse. This wasn't quite right. I'm done with this. I'm going to look, oh, I've got this other idea. I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to go and focus on that. And, you know, this is the going back to the soup, like going back to the creative soup. Oh, yeah, I'll go back to the initial essence and find what new spark wants to come through. And so then you've got this project that's like screaming out to be brought to maturity and released in its totality. And sometimes the finishing of a project can be so healing in its ability to kind of midwife us through our own shit, but also in maturing our own capacity to be with our creative essence and our devotional capacity. You know, even if that project doesn't quite come through how we wanted it, or doesn't quite look perfect, or doesn't necessarily do anything, it's not about that. There's something really magical in just the process of not just birthing something and going, okay, I'm done here, I'm out. Actually birthing it and tending to it to its maturity, where it's able, if you're looking at it like a baby, it's then now able to tend for itself, and it can go off and do what it needs to do, whatever it is. Because, you know, like you were mentioning earlier, Gigi, like when we're connected with that mother essence and bringing through whatever is coming through us to be birthed, being the midwife to that is almost like a responsibility as well, to really see it through and let it be its, let it be what it wants to be. Whether it's something that serves us afterwards or not is not the point. Whether it's the greatest piece of work you've ever created at the end of it is not the point. Just like when you raise a child, it's not about what job they end up getting, how brilliant a person they are. It's about giving them their life, their life force, and allowing them to kind of go and do what they need to do. Like the archers who hold a bow and say, wear the bow. The archer is the life force that comes in and wants to kind of merge with the bow and get something ready, put an arrow in the bow, and then we've got to be that bow that bends with the archer and then releases the arrow, allows the arrow to fly. But if we're like getting this arrow and then just dropping it to the ground, kind of like, nah, done with that one. You know, we end up with a lot of littered arrows around us, and eventually the life force is drained out and we can't even access that anymore. And, you know, then we normalize women getting to older age. So I'm going to focus solely on women here, but know this can happen with men too, getting to later in life and feeling like we've got no vital energy, we've got no libido, we've got no desire for, you know, anything in relation to the body. We're kind of shriveled up. And we normalize this and say, oh, that's just part of menopause. It's okay. I'm fine with not having any sex anymore. I'm kind of done with it. My libido's gone, but that's okay. And I'm fine with, whatever, insert whatever you want here. But you can see where I'm going with this. This is like a phenomenon that has been normalized. And I really feel like a big aspect of it, not all of it, but a big piece here is this not leaning into these darker spaces and leaning into this capacity to really devote ourselves to things, to their fruition, devote ourselves to that creative capacity, because of all this kind of conditioning of I'm not good enough, or my art's shit, or it's okay, I don't really need to do this. I'll just focus on something more mundane and easy to kind of deal with.
It's so it's so full. It's so, you know what it is? It's just so real, and the realness is not something we've been prepared for in our society, and it's coming back, isn't it, you know, to that realness and being able to look what's actually there in the face, and not to have to like make up some stories around it, so we can kind of let's just like float around the edges instead of looking directly at it, because when we look directly at it, we actually realize that it's not that scary. It's just when we're like kind of like edge around it is when actually, you know, the fear is going to stay with you because you're afraid of the thing that you're not facing. And I found that the creative process has been such a powerful teacher for me for that, of also letting go of the attachments, because I think the attachments to what it looks like comes when you're not facing it. If you're not looking directly at it, then you have all these attachments and stories to it where you're like, oh, I'd like it to, you know, look like this, and then it could like look like this and look like that, and then you can get lost in that whole delusion of like what it could be or what it should be. And I found like the more I just look directly at the thing that's coming through and I mother it, like you said, I midwife it, I'm like, what is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? Like just asking that question in my body, in my heart, like what is the essence of this? And how can I support that to shape shift, rather than getting so attached to what it looks like, what I want it to look like, or how I think it should be, and just getting so caught up in that. That's when we struggle and suffer. That is when we struggle and suffer. And the more that I've just actually got behind the energy that's coming in, or behind the creative impulse, I'm getting behind myself as well. So it doesn't feel like I'm struggling, I'm suffering. And then, you know, like you said, with children, it's the same thing. It's like, who is this person? What is this person here to share? What is this person here to like, how is this person here to express? Let's just support that and help that experience grow, not what I think it should be, or like just putting too much of our ego in on everything. It's like, it's also not all about us. And I feel like for me, the more that I've deepened into my spiritual practice and my practice connected to mother, for me, source energy, the more that I've just, that's dissolving naturally, because my focus is not on myself. My focus is on, you know, how can I support this energy? How can I be my soul self, my soul expression? And it's so liberating. It's so liberating. For me, I've just felt like, wow, the creative journey feels so much better for me when I know that there's a greater reason or a greater power behind it. That's not just me, myself, and I just kind of like all talking around the table going, what do you think this should be? And I don't like that. And what about this? And la 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 la. And it's like, let's just open up and see what wants to happen. And that's the beauty of babies coming into the world. I mean, fucking hell, this is a soul coming into a body coming out.
Yeah.
Like, that is what it is. That is what
Yeah.
we are. And just kind of coming back to that simplicity of viewing the miracle that is birth and revering that takes a lot of pressure off, like what we think things should be, and just kind of stepping back a little bit and going, wow, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than me. And that's exciting. That activates me. That inspires me now that, I've really honed in on that. I mean, I say that, but it's been, years in the making of me, like, working through the mess and the shit, and facing myself, looking directly into those places that are uncomfortable.